everyone. I'm going to call the Board of Supervisors to order. May I have a roll call, please, Mr. Hohen?
Supervisor Giomi.
Here.
Supervisor White. Here. Supervisor Horton. Here. Supervisor Schutte.
Here.
Mayor Bagwell.
Here.
You have your quorum.
Thank you so much. Let's see, is Ian here? Uh-oh. I don't see Ian. Okay, then we're going to move on and we'll go to the Pledge of Allegiance. Seems strange not to get prayed into good action. Lisa, would you like to lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to opening public comment. Do I have any opening public comment? Mr. French.
Denny French, Carson City. Thank you, Mayor and Board Supervisors. I was able to get to the Board of Equalization meeting and the debit management meeting and the open space meetings this last week, or this week. And I found in one situation, it was very contentious for me. Frustration and such took over. And I think one of the things that I self-respect of my behavior and such, and oversight of myself, I've come to the conclusion that it's very complicated for me. And one of the things that I might be able to figure out is to have more connect with actual parks, recreation people, and then open space people on the side, so that when I get to a meeting, I'm prepared a little bit without having to sort of nudge them into whatever I'm trying to encourage them to consider at the meetings. So what I've also sort of figured out is that I actually feel that the Board of Parks and Recreation and the open space should be combined, as a lot of their efforts financially, their oversights, their land acquisition considerations, and their equipment often have to share space. And their considerations on all those things, it's sort of torn up because of the way that the meetings have to include both, but don't necessarily allow space for conversation on one or the other, depending on which meeting you're at. So while it sounds sort of crazy, I think that combining the two would be much more efficient and utilize staff much more with better, I think. I mean, they've got great staff. It's a shame to have everything divided up so they have to show up to both meetings and separate the parks from recreation and open space because they're so intertwined. So that's a consideration I hope that you will consider. Also, I'd like everybody to recognize the fact that the monarch butterfly is in the news and it's having a hard time. Weather and other factors are coming into it. And so I would really like to encourage us all to consider corridors, rest places. Article by Miss Joanne Skelly about the monarch and us participating by developing parks or recreational areas that have it in there, but she doesn't bring that up, but personal gardens to help nourish those little critters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have any other opening public comment? Come on up. Morning.
Hello, I'm Mike Orlick with Battleborn Tree Service, and I've had a business here in Carson for almost 13 years, and we're having more and more competition with companies that are not legitimate companies, and I was wondering if this is the right place to request that we could, ask tree companies to get a contractor's license, because there is no contractor's license required for tree companies in Nevada. So, somebody like myself and a couple other companies in town have millions wrapped up in their equipment and their yard space and their advertising, and they're simply just being beat by people that are doing business illegally. And it's starting to hurt local businesses that have been serving this community for a lot of years. And just some way to kind of even the playing field. I have to have a contractor's license in California, and I'm really wondering why there's no requirement to have it in Nevada. We're doing, landscapers have to have a C10 through Nevada State Contractors Board. And I have a pile of past receipts that are in the six figures with no contractor's license required. Me neither. I don't have a contractor's license. There's not even a way to obtain one for tree service. So, we're getting beat out on bids, sometimes up to 80 or 90%. It's not even close. It's actually pretty insulting. So that's it, really.
Okay, thank you so much. We'll get with you.
All right.
All right, thank you. Do I have anyone else? Nope, not public comment, just changing seats. Okay. All right, well, with that, that's okay. We will then move on to agenda item 6, which is approval of our minutes of January 16th, 2025. Do I have any changes or corrections? If not, Supervisor Giomi, motion, please.
Move to approve the Carson City Board of Supervisors and Carson City Liquor and Entertainment Board meeting minutes of 16 January 2025 as presented.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Let's see if I can clear it. We're now on to our consent agenda. No member requested a item to be pulled, so I'll accept a motion. Supervisor Giomi.
Move to approve the consent agenda consisting of items 7A, 8A, 8B, 9A, 10A, 10B, and 11A, all as presented.
I have a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 13A, which is discussion and possible action regarding our staff recommended assumptions to be used in preparation for our fiscal year 2026 budget. Mrs. Russell Benaboo, take us through this.
Thank you very much. Good morning. That was really quick. Still checking emails, sorry. You guys got through that really quickly. All right. So for the record, Sherry Russell Benaboo, CFO. This year for property taxes, it looks like I just got the revenue from the state. It looks like our assessed value is actually going up 2.6% instead of 1.6%. So that's positive. However, you can see the green bar there is catching up to the revenue, which that kind of happens, and then it's kind of starts to turn down. So we'll see what happens, but our assessed value has been steadily growing for a good 10 years now. So it is possible that we could see a decline here. The cap for this year will be 3% and 8% because CPI won't affect the caps this year, so they will be as normal. Come on. I always do this little example for the public so they understand how the property taxes work because they are very complex. If you have a property, brand new property just built, $400,000 value, the assessed value of that property will only be 35% of that, so $140,000. The tax rate that we charge currently is 3.57% per $100 of assessed value. And so the first year, there's no cap. You pay the $4,998 for your property tax assessment. The second year, the cap would take effect. So if we leave the 3.57 alone and say that second year, the property increases by 9%, your your tax value with a 3.57% would be $5,448. However, the 3% cap stops it, so it's only $5,148. The $300 goes to abatement. The next year, they say the assessed value only goes up by 1%. That still gives you a tax rate charge of $5,502 for your taxes. The cap will still keep it at $5,302 at that same 3.57 rate. So we're still abating $200 of the tax. So the next year, you can see how the abatement kind of piles up. So the next year, say we have a decrease of 3%. In this instance, the 3.57 rate is only $5,337. So the 3% cap is $5,461. We can only charge the $5,337. So in this instance, it might make sense to increase the tax rate if we're having struggles. And if we increase at the bottom there to 3.66, we would be able to charge $5,472, and then we'd only have like $11 in abatement. So we would actually be able to collect taxes at that point. This year, I do a calculation every year where I say, what if we increase the tax rate by 1%? Last year, if you remember, it was like $12,000 or $15,000 is all the revenue we would get. 1% without the cap is usually $250,000, $300,000. This year, it's about $40,000. And I think that's because of all the new properties that have been built. There's a lot more new property in the area. So if we increase the tax rate, we would recognize a little bit of extra revenue the first year. And assessed value is only 2.6%. So that's kind of up to you guys. Let me go through this whole thing and then we'll talk about it a little more. The property tax revenue we've projected, it's been around 5.5 to 6% for a couple years now. You can see in 24, it was actually 7.1%. Again, all the new property that's coming on that are not subject to the cap are helping that out. So this year, we're looking at about 5% increase. And then I budgeted another 5% in 26 as well. Again, like I said, we've been seeing 5.5 to 6% because of growth. So I think the 5% is conservative. And then this is just a representation of our rate, which you can see back in 2017 was 3.6 or 5.2, and we increased it 5 cents at that time, and it's been 3.57 for many years now. The countywide tax rates, I always present this slide. This is last year's Red Book because it's not published until June, I think, for the current year. But the only one that changed here was Eureka. It was 2.0896, and now it's 2.2896. Everybody else stayed exactly the same. And you can see many are capped out. We're one of the lower at 3.57. Now to move on to consolidated taxes. This is a fun monster this year. The state is implementing a new revenue system. So we only got half of our consolidated distribution for November sales taxes. So my whole projection is only on 4 months of data. And I am told that we will have a full distribution for February, so representation of December. And then in March, they will clean up all the ones that they missed for November, and we should have fully recognized all of our revenue by the end of March. That's if everything goes smoothly and the state does everything they say they're gonna do. So hopefully, before we finish taxes, I'll have a better idea of what C-taxes are doing. Right now, with 4 months of data, it shows that we're down 2%. So from what we budgeted, so not looking great. So I did budget flat in 2025. We budgeted for $44,103,460, And so that's why I'm staying flat with that, what we originally budgeted, hoping that the Christmas period will bring in additional revenue. And then it is a legislative year, so we've got a lot of legislators in town. That should also increase our sales taxes. And then for 2026, I've only increased it 1%. Just trying to be conservative and with very limited data. And I can't guarantee those are going to stay like I normally am like, yeah, this is a good estimate, but I'm only working with 4 months of data. So as March rolls around, we might tweak those as we know, as more data comes in, and I'll report back to you on what we did in May when we give you the tentative budget, if that's okay. So I did a very, very preliminary general fund 5-year projection. All the departments are reviewing what we did now, so we will have tweaks to this. But as of right now, I'm showing available for expenditure of around $6 to $7 million. The landfill transfer is it's big. They're bringing in quite a bit of revenue, and it just keeps growing. It doesn't seem to matter when we raise rates; they just keep coming. I can afford 1% of general fund expenditures for the fleet, which we were told to set aside many years ago. And then the extraordinary maintenance for the for that transfer, I can afford that. But after that, there's really no remaining capital. If you look at 2026, it does show an 18.2 ending fund balance, but if you go to 2030, it's only 10.2. So I could potentially afford a little bit of capital to get us to the 8.3, which is our bottom for our fiscal policies for ending fund balance. But that's about $800,000. So I'm glad during augmentations, you all chose to move that money forward. So we have a little money for capital this year because it's not looking good right now. And again, if C-taxes look better in the next couple of months, this could change and we could have a little more, but I can't depend on that now. And then our budget calendar this year, it's very standard for February and March. We're preparing for that April 15th deadline. That's when the tentative budget has to be filed with the state. So we're working to get that complete. So February and March, we're getting our capital together. We're talking about supplementals. We do have the board retreat tomorrow where we'll talk about capital. So if the public wants to join us, we are talking about budget and capital at that meeting. And then April, we really will just be finalizing things and getting the information into Granicus, filing that tentative budget. Our first meeting to talk about the budget this upcoming year will be May 1st. And that'll be the tentative budget where we look at supplemental and capital requests. And then we'll add those really quickly. We have 1 week to do it this year. And we'll prepare to present the final budget. There is an NRS 354.596 that requires us to have our final budget approval after the third Monday in May, which has to be after the 18th. So it's our meetings are May 1st and May 15th. So we're going to have a special meeting. Right now, I have that tentatively sat in here as May 27th. If that works for everybody, great. I will need to know what that date is by April 15th. It has to be in the tentative budget. So we have some time, but that's what I'm kind of looking at now. As far as other expenses, I just want to mention PERS has increased astronomically again. For public safety, it's 8.75% up. It was 50%, now it's 58.75% that we have to pay to PERS. For regular employees, I think it's 3% up. I think it's 36% now. It used to be 33. So PERS is out of control. We're budgeting for health insurance. We're looking at about 10 or 12% this year. Everything's just, I already informed you, workers' comp is going to be a high increase because those keep coming in. So, this is why we have no capital. Everything just keeps going up. Any questions? Sorry, I'm not a good news Nancy. I'm kind of a sad news Sherry today.
It's pretty
I don't
good.
see I don't see your crystal ball.
It's back at the office.
So does any member have a question specific at this point? So let's then discuss, let's discuss the property tax rate, because that's the piece that Ms. Benaboo needs to be able to complete her next step of her work. In general, are we leave it the same? 40,000 max out of the, I'm not seeing anything.
Inclined to leave it the same.
Leave it the same, okay. Let me see, is there any public comment on this agenda item? Okay, just as one, I do have a specific question, though. If you go back to your slide that showed the 5-year projection.
For property taxes,
No, your 5-year projection
Oh.
to 2030.
the entire 5-year.
Yeah,
projection,
there
yes.
you go. So I just want to throw out discussion for all of us because it's been interesting. I've been attending a lot of other meetings from other jurisdictions and doing some talks at some summits and some of these other jurisdictions, and to listen to what is going on in their communities right now. They're actually cutting into their baseline of their budgets because they can't withstand those increases that Sherry talked about. And I know there's a lot of public sometimes that thinks we could change that ending fund balance figure. And I just like to bring it up that I think our policy is sound. I think it's the reason we are fiscally in decent shape and not actually laying employees off, which you have in the other communities, and that we're using the 5-year projection to, again, make sure we have the real cash in the bank. And so I just want to double check we're all still on the same fiscal policy mentality. We don't see any need to, we're dropping all the way down to 10.2 unless good news Sherry shows up.
Well,
But I
and-
just want to bring that up even for the public
Yeah, and
to
there's a
tell them
reason-
why.
Yeah, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
NRS requires us to have at least 4%, which is only half a month of savings.
It's nothing.
1% is 8.3. It's 1 month of savings. So that's the bottom of our fiscal policies. We need to have at least 1 month of savings. And then the 16.7 is the top. That's 2 months of savings.
Right.
So just in case, a recession happens, maybe we stand with the negative 2%. We're going to make it if we have
Right.
a decent fund balance. If we don't have a fund balance, then we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be giving early termination and trying to, fix our budget like the other counties are doing right now.
So I just wanted to bring it up for the public, because again, occasionally I get a question is, they think it's a lot of money, but when you come down to the number of days,
Yeah.
and I'm just indicating when you're in a fiscal crisis, 2 weeks or 1 month is not enough cash to have in the bank to be making potentially good decisions on where you make cuts. So if everybody's okay, I just thought I'd, again, for the public and for all of us to say, that's why Carson City is faring a little bit better than I'm hearing from the surrounding jurisdictions. But, so with that, if anyone who wants to make a motion for the 357? Okay, Ms. Schutte. Supervisors.
I move to direct staff to use $3.57 as the property tax rate in preparing the fiscal year 2026 Carson City budget.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you for your good work.
Thank
And,
you very much.
Come on, Department of Taxation. We need data.
Agreed, agreed. As soon as I get it, I will.
Sure.
Can I ask a question about that? You know, it's, I mean, I appreciate that we're very conservative because I'm worried about that. And I know you are too. I mean, I know what we went through when we converted our financial system and the issues that it caused internally and the amount of work you had to do. And now they're doing it at the state level. And frankly, it scares the hell out of me.
I agree. I'm terrified right
There's
now.
no one other than the internal folks overseeing it. We can't look at it to see if
Agreed.
it's right. We don't see the inputs. I mean, it's the way the state works, right? We're not supposed to be able to see where the sales tax revenue is coming from.
Right.
And-
The only
and
thing
so
I
they
can
could
tell
literally
you-
say it's anything. I mean, not that they
Yeah.
would wantingly do that, but one little error in there of 1% magnified by the amount of money that the state gets, it's an astronomical figure, and and I don't think there's anything we can do about it, but it's just scary. It's just
I
scary.
agree. I agree. I will tell you that we have paid some incentive payments for 2024 for the companies we have agreements with. And I have seen those tax forms because I pay the incentive, and November and December look great. So that gives me a little hope that maybe November and December are not going to be so bad once we get the final
Well,
numbers.
it might be a
'cause
way we could back into it because of that sort of inside knowledge that you have, but still, that's such a small percentage of
It is.
what comes in that they could be 100% right and something else could be wrong, but
Yeah, and I have no knowledge.
hopefully
on the
with your knowledge and the
construction
other
and-
CFOs around the state in government can get together, and if there's something that really is alarming, we can go to the governor and say, something's not
Absolutely.
right here, and let's really look at it. And I think,
Absolutely.
I
And I
mean,
know
I
we've
think
already
he'll
done that
listen.
with gas taxes.
I think he'll
so-
listen. So
Yeah.
I just,
Yep.
it's, so we're taking the right approach because that is probably one of the biggest unknowns we've ever dealt with.
Agreed.
So-
That's why I'm being very, very cautiously optimistic.
Well,
Very
and worse than
conservative.
that, they withheld and only gave us in their estimate what
Half.
50% of
Yeah.
it was.
Yes.
Who knows?
Without
For
that ending
November.
fund balance, again, people don't realize you can't sustain the cash flow,
No, if
right?
we had
That's not
been at-
supposed
if
to
we
be
had
a
been at-
right,
If we'd been at 2 weeks
right.
at 4%, we would have had trouble making payroll.
So it's like, it's just important, and again, I'm very proud of our fiscal policy here that we don't count on, I want to count on, but did they also, just as a thought process, did they give us notice that they were gonna be reducing payments? Or we
Couple
got,
weeks notice.
that's
just a
it.
couple, yeah.
Can you,
It was right before the November payment came. They're like, oh,
oh,
by the
PS.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, and they had to have known they've been working on this for,
Well, yeah, it's a 3-year phase in or
yeah,
something.
to
so
not
they've been
give us
working on
any
it for a
notice they were
while.
gonna be withholding funds is not so great, but anyway. Okay, thank you. Other comments? All right, we are then going to move, it is, if we close here to 9 o'clock, so we can move on with our next agenda item, which is discussion and possible action regarding a show cause determination on whether business license 008-595-2024 issued to M.Y. Mesas Gomez 2 LLC, My Vape and Smoke Shop, located at 1800 East William Street, number 16, in Carson City, should be suspended, canceled, or revoked pursuant to our municipal code for an alleged violation. Ms. Sullivan, are you going to start this item off?
Mayor,
Oh,
may I have a word?
yes, sorry.
You know, we're being asked to do something here today that I think rises to the level of one of the most serious decisions that I've been made to ask. And I can tell you, we're being asked to provide our opinion on a situation that involves felonies. I really feel like before the courts have chimed in, we're in the wrong place of order here. I think I would ask that this agenda item be set aside until after the courts have heard this and do what they're going to do. I think this is, we're just in the wrong place here.
Okay. Thank you for your comment, and we'll take that into consideration in the right process order. Ms.
Thank you.
Sullivan?
Hope Sullivan, Community Development Director. The Municipal Code 4.04210 identifies the process to suspend, cancel, or revoke a business license. So as Supervisor White noted, we're in a civil process. We're not looking at criminal activity specifically. When we consider good cause, what good cause says in the business license section of the code is it includes actions that include the commission of or permitting or causing the commission of any act in the operation of a business, which act is made unlawful or is prohibited by any ordinance, rule, or law of Carson City or state or federal government. The board may, on its own motion or initiative, require the licensee to appear before the board at a time and place fixed by the board and show cause why the business license should not be suspended, revoked, or canceled. So what you are doing today is I brought forward to you a complaint that I received from the sheriff's office. Based on that report, you asked me to schedule this hearing, and so that the business owner would have an opportunity to speak to you and to answer any questions you have about what happened. So I don't want anybody to think anything's been decided. All that's been decided is to have a hearing to give the business owner that opportunity. To review the complaint that came in, on July 18, 2024, uniformed officers from Carson City Sheriff's Office visited smoke shops and vape stores and provided warnings regarding selling drug paraphernalia and selling vapes that contain THCA. On October 23, 24, a plainclothes detective from the sheriff's office visited the subject property and purchased a quag, which is a methamphetamine pipe, as well as an electronic vape containing THCA. When the detective sought to purchase the quag, the employee advised that they are not supposed to sell them because of what they are used for, that law enforcement had come around a few months earlier, and that the sale had to be a cash transaction. When the detective sought to purchase the vape containing THCA, the employee showed the officer a rack of them and explained they would need to come off the shelf. These actions violate NRS 453.560, which states it's unlawful to sell drug paraphernalia, and NRS 678B.530, which states it's unlawful to sell cannabis without a license. Both Sheriff Furlong and Sergeant Samantha Torres from the Sheriff's Office are present. The business owner is present as well. And again, I manage the business license division, so I am here for the show cause hearing. We have notified the property owners by first-class mail on January 17, 2025. We then followed up with the business owners to verify they had received the notice of this hearing, and they are present today. So with that, I turn it back to you, Mayor. And again, Sheriff's Office is here to answer questions, and then the business owners are present.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question to what you just said? It's just clarifying.
Sure.
You said you notified the business owner and the property owner. You said property owner.
Oh, I'm sorry. I notified the business owner.
Okay, thank you. That's what I
Thank you
just
for
wanted
that
to clarify.
clarification.
Okay. Mr. Reese, I would appreciate it if you could opine on whether there's a criminal track and an administrative track, because I look at this one as an administrative penalty concerning their actual business license. Supervisor White has indicated that he thinks that those should not be happening simultaneous or us first. Can you opine on that for us, please?
I'm fully aware we are not hearing a criminal action today. But
Right.
this is rolling into a criminal action. We're being asked to opine on what is eventually going to be a criminal court action.
Thank
So
you.
This is Todd Reese, Supervising Deputy DA. Mayor, you're correct that the administrative and the criminal tracks are separate tracks. As it impacts the administrative side, a criminal conviction can be taken as evidence on the administrative side. But the administrative side doesn't necessarily require a criminal action or even a criminal conviction. On the administrative side, it's a civil hearing. The standard of proof and absent a different standard of proof, the standard of proof is a preponderance of the evidence. That's been described as determining that something's more likely than not. Now that's, in other words, 51% or more. That's very different from the criminal context. In the criminal context, you're looking at beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a much, much higher standard. And so there are many cases in the law where the criminal burden has not been met, but where the civil burden has been met. Perhaps one of the most infamous ones is O.J. Simpson. He was not convicted criminally, but he did face a civil judgment for wrongful death and entered against him. So your action here today does not require the criminal case to be adjudicated or even to go forward. You are here just in a civil setting, just taking a look at the business license, and you can decide for yourself, based upon a preponderance of evidence, whether you believe that there was acts here that were done that are committed that are prohibited by Nevada law.
So let me ask as a small follow-up to that, does an administrative hearing such as this inform a criminal proceeding? Or they're really totally separate?
It's more the reverse. The criminal proceeding can inform the administrative proceeding, but the administrative proceeding does not really inform the criminal proceeding because the criminal burden is much higher. The prosecutor is still going to be required to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the acts that took place in order for criminal liability to attach, and that a civil a body decided beyond a preponderance of the evidence doesn't inform that much.
Okay, good. I just wanted to understand where we are in the actual process. I know Mr. White's feelings. Are we ready to proceed to hearing? Yes? Okay, we will proceed. So may I have the information, Sheriff Furlong? Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff Furlong, for the record. Just kind of a prelude into where we're going here. The Sheriff's Office has a mission statement to provide for public safety. One of the goals of that mission statement is to engage with our public, engage in the community, and take preventative steps where we possibly can. We call that to educate and to prevent before we take steps to enforcement. I believe that that is a strong suit of the department. Many of you may have already seen, excuse me, our DUI checkpoint that's being advertised for tomorrow night. These are not activities that are designed to enforce. They're activities that are designed to educate and prevent. And when those cases where all else fails, then obviously we move to an enforcement type of activity. We do this same process with our enforcement of underage drinking laws, educate, prevent, and if all else fails, then take an enforcement action. That's my policy at the Sheriff's Office. In this case, there was an education and a prevention effort that took place, and finally, an enforcement activity. We do this consistently to create partners in the community. We heard some open comment this morning. Good partners in the community, good businesses in the community that support the decisions and the directions of this board. And with that, I will turn it over to Sergeant Samantha Torres if you have any questions about the activity that took place back in July when that enforcement and education did take place.
So I'll start with the educational component, if I may. So when you went to the business to inform them of the rules. Did you see violations at that time that you instructed them that they shouldn't be doing and did not take an immediate enforcement action? I'm kind of wanting to understand that first visit.
Yes, so in July, my team went to all of the local shops and made contact with the either clerks or the store owners, and we were advised to let them know, hey, let your business owner know of our actions today and our education. At this specific store, I believe that there was these pipes inside the store, and they were instructed, hey, these are devices that are used for drug paraphernalia to ingest methamphetamine. They acknowledged it. They removed it from their store off of the shelves. And there was an education piece from my team specifically instructing them what a methamphetamine pipe and methamphetamine bong looks like.
Okay, so the specific devices.
Yes.
That you then discovered on your second trip were the same devices that you had previously instructed them were
Correct.
inappropriate for them to have.
Yeah, and in this
Okay.
specific shop, it was actually taken off the shelf and in the back room.
Okay. And then the other component of this is the THC content, right? And so, and that's done with a measurement, I'm gonna assume, or whatever.
So there was an education piece during our first round of the education for the methamphetamine pipes and bongs. There was no warnings given for the THCA. So when we went to go take enforcement action, there was an enforcement action and also education piece for the THCA. There was no enforcement for the THCA. And this shop in particular said that she would remove all of those products. And I brought down the cannabis compliance officer to educate this specific shop. So that way they knew what products they could have for THCA and what products they couldn't.
Okay. Does anybody else, Supervisor Shooty?
Can you, so what you were just talking about with the THCA, so you said there was education and enforcement, but the enforcement did not include, it was more of an educational piece, so the THCA, that wasn't an additional
That was not an
enforcement action?
additional enforcement action, no. So we learned that shops were selling the THCA after we already took our education piece for the methamphetamine pipes and bongs. So when we went out to the shops again for the enforcement piece for the oil burners and quags for the methamphetamine pipes and bongs, we encountered the THCA and chose not to do any enforcement action because they weren't educated.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Giomi?
Was this, how many of the businesses from the time you did the educational tour in July to October, how many like businesses did you visit? All of them? Some of them?
Some, not all of them, because we were getting consistent behavior on, the word had spread that, hey, we're not able to sell these devices. And so we went to a handful and we were getting negative results. They said, no, we took them off the shelves. We're not selling them. And this was the one specific shop that was still selling them.
So they weren't targeted per se, you sampled several
Correct.
shops?
Yes.
That's what I was getting at.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Do I have any other questions at this point?
I have a number of questions.
Supervisor White?
I'm going to kind of separate my questions between the meth and the THC. So I'm going to start, because actually I see these as two wholly different situations. So I'm going to start with the meth pipe part of it. So I'm really curious to understand what the nature of the warnings in education were. I mean, how do you describe to somebody what a meth pipe is?
So in the NRS, when you're determining a piece of paraphernalia, part of that subsection is that there's knowledge that that device can be used to ingest an illegal substance, so a controlled substance. So that was the education that we provided these businesses, that we know that people are coming into these shops, purchasing these devices to smoke methamphetamine. And that was the education portion.
So I'm curious how you determine that that's the only substance that could be smoked in that device.
Per the NRS, if a person knows that that device can be used to ingest an illegal substance, that qualifies as drug paraphernalia. And that was the education. It's not whether or not it can be used for another substance. We inform them that that substance is placed in this device to be used to smoke methamphetamine.
Do you know what hot knifing is?
Hot knifing?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
That's where you take a drug and you put it on a butter knife, and you put those butter knives on your kitchen stove. And when they get hot, you press them together, and the smoke comes up, and you breathe it. So what
Interesting.
you're telling me is every kitchen in this town has paraphernalia in their drawers.
I'm telling you our education piece for this specific instance in accordance with Nevada law. And that's how we educated the public. I'm not telling you that there's other ways or other means, but for this specific instance, this is what me and my team did for the public.
So when you went in for the enforcement side,
Mhm.
when the officer made this purchase,
Yes.
did he tell the clerk did the officer tell the clerk that they were gonna go smoke meth with this pipe?
No, but the store clerk acknowledged that she knew that that is what those devices were used for, specifically methamphetamine.
So the store clerk knew it was used for meth because Carson City Sheriff's Office told him it was.
So she made statements during this encounter that she knew that she wasn't allowed to sell them because of its use for methamphetamine. And then later in an interview, she said that she acknowledged that those devices were used for methamphetamine use. Yes.
I mean, the clerk's knowledge that meth could be used in this device came through the education process.
To be honest, it was both. I've had encounters with this individual, and she has a criminal history. So I believe in this specific instance, she knows from prior history as well as our education, because she mentioned that they had to take them off the shelves because they were used for methamphetamine and they were in the back, and that's why she was selling them for cash, because she knew she wasn't supposed to sell them because of their illegal use.
So NRS 453.544 defines paraphernalia. At 1K, it talks about objects to ingest marijuana, cocaine, hashish oil. Oddly, meth is not in that list. Do you have any idea where else meth is listed?
.556, if you read that portion of the NRS, and I believe it's subsection 6 or 7, it shows that any device that somebody has knowledge that illegal, or it can be used to violate the Controlled Substance Act, it falls under that.
So was there residue in this meth pipe?
There
that was
doesn't need to be,
purchased?
per the NRS.
Was there residue in this device?
Oh, no, not the one at the store, no. It was a brand-new quag, which was a meth pipe, which was a quag is a bong, and it's got the meth pipe with the bulb at the end and the hole at the top. So it's got the meth pipe portion attached to a bong.
So let's move on to the THC side of the deal. Same first question. What was the nature of the warning and the education that took place?
So I was educated by the cannabis compliance officer that there were shops in town that were selling products that contained THCA. And so part of my team going out to these shops where we were trying to look for those products to educate these shops that, hey, you need a license in order to sell these products. And that was the reasoning for that part of the education. And that's why I brought out the cannabis compliance officer for that portion.
What was the concentration of the THCA in the device?
I don't have that answer. I just know that in talking with the cannabis compliance officer, the process of heating up that product, it turns it into an illegal substance, which they need a license in order to sell those products.
So in 453.096, marijuana is defined. NRS 678B.520 identifies that any THC that is below 0.3% is not considered a cannabis. And NRS 557160 defines anything under 3% as being hemp. And apparently it's not illegal to sell hemp. So if we don't know what the concentration of the THCA is in this device, what is the violation?
The heating process for that, when it's consumed, it turns it into an illegal process. I can get you that answer at a later date of what the specific concentration is. I know that the cannabis compliance officer does have that information, and our attempts in this effort was just to provide education, and no enforcement was taken during this encounter for the THCA.
But our agenda item says they're here to revoke their business license because they were selling THCA.
Mayor,
mean
I
there's-
did represent that in the complaint. That was my understanding, was that both items were educated on in July and were addressed at the time of arrest in October. So you're now receiving additional information that's in conflict with what I wrote in the report.
Thank you.
NRS 453.139 defines THC to include Delta 7, Delta 8, Delta 9, and Delta 10. That's what's controlled. None of those four are THCA. So how do we get to where we are today?
Again, I can get you those answers at a future date. I know that when I talked with the cannabis compliance officer, it has to do with the heating process of that device, and that those THCA products are getting children who are getting their hands on this an extreme high, which is making it dangerous for the public. And so the cannabis compliance officer actually went to the wholesale markets in Reno and advised them, hey, you guys aren't allowed to sell these products to these local stores anymore because of that consumption process and that high that these people are getting. And it does raise to a certain level. I can't give you that number right now. I don't have it off the top of my head. But those wholesale producers were informed. And I believe in this instance, the business owner here just had some of that product still on their shelf from prior instances.
But again, I guess we're not here today for a violation of selling THCA.
Correct. Yeah, that was educational purposes during this encounter. There was no enforcement action. And the business owner was very cooperative in our encounter with the THCA, and the cannabis compliance officer came and educated her, and she's more than willing to accept that education.
Prior to the education, the store owner or the clerk was not aware they should not sell THCA?
For the THCA, my team and the cannabis compliance officer did not make any contact with any of the stores. That was the new wave of what we were doing during this phase, yeah.
I'm confused. This store that we're considering today, did they receive education on the THCA?
Not until that day, sir.
What day?
The enforcement day, when we made contact with them for the enforcement action on the methamphetamine pipes and quag.
Prior to that education, was this specific store and employees aware they should not be selling THCA?
No, not from my team. No, we did not have any educational contacts with any stores regarding the THCA.
Thank you.
Does anybody
All I
else
have.
have a question for them? Okay, so why don't I give an opportunity for the business owner to come up and you'll have to identify yourselves for the record, please.
For the record, my name is Yahida Wagner.
My name is Marina Macias Gomez.
So you're the business owner and you're the business owner?
We both
Oh,
are. Yeah.
co-owners, okay.
Co-owners.
So you understand the case that's been brought before us to consider your license, and the rationale for the discussion is that the sheriff's office did a educational component about the product,
Yes.
right?
The
And-
thing is that, so the educational, I think where I'm having a hard time is that they're not going to owners, okay? They're going to clerks. These clerks don't necessarily purchase, they don't have any jurisdiction, right, at that business. So I felt like Officer Torres said, I was very compliant once I found out I wasn't supposed to sell that. I had originally heard about the first incident on the news, but they never came to owners. They're going to cashiers that, necessarily or essentially don't, it's a job for them. It's not their livelihood or something to call their own, right? So I do feel that if they do go forward with educational things, that it should target owners. That way we are aware 100%, because again, they went to clerks that don't necessarily translate that to owners.
As an owner, is it your responsibility to train your clerks on what is or is not appropriate?
Yes, so I can tell you exactly what happened, okay? I heard about it on the news that day about, so the THC, I had no idea. I honestly did not. I bought from a reputable wholesaler in Reno. I have all of my invoicing. I absolutely had no idea on that. I thought I was going to a wholesaler that could also educate me and say, hey, we're not supposed to sell this, right? As a smoke shop, you need a different license for that, knowing that they also have what licenses what I can purchase, right? So with the THCA, very compliant, I had no idea. So again, going back to, I guess, the oil burner, okay, again, purchased from a reputable wholesaler, and I found out on the news. I did take everything off the shelf, and I did instruct the cashiers not to sell it, okay? We also own another business, and I work full-time, and I apologize, that's no excuse, but I should have taken those products and taken them back for credit as soon as I was not going to sell them. So they were on the shelf. They were not for sale. They were in the back. They weren't even in a stock room. They were in our office because I had instructed the cashiers not to sell them.
Okay. Supervisor Giomi.
So just to try and understand the chronology, the education happened in July. Were you not aware of the July education?
No, I believe, I'm not sure when they went to the smoke shop or if they went to that smoke shop specifically or who they spoke to, but I heard about it on the news a few days later.
A few days later in July, not in
Yes,
October.
in July.
So you're talking about
correct.
July.
And that is when I removed the oil burners because again, I will be honest, I'm not a criminal. You can look at our records. Like I've had 2 parking tickets my whole entire life. I have no criminal background. My mom worked for the school district for 20 plus years, and then we decided to venture into the convenience store business. So we do have a convenience store as well. And then we decided to open up a smoke shop right next door.
So shortly after the actual education visit in July, you heard about it on the news.
Yes.
And you heard that your business was visited, or you just heard in general about it?
I just heard in general, so I
And
pulled
so
the product.
based on that, you removed the product
Correct.
from the front
The front shelves.
and brought it to
correct.
the back.
Correct.
And what was your intention 3 or 4 months later
No, I
to
was
do with
supposed
the
to.
product.
So I was supposed to, no, like, I apologize. I 100% sincerely take responsibility. I should have grabbed that product, stuck it in my car, and taken it back to the wholesaler. I work full-time still because I'm still trying to leave my full-time job because I have 2 girls. I have a freshman at UNR, so I needed a couple more months to buy me so I could, for financial purposes, still work full-time, but I eventually want to leave my full-time job to take care of my businesses, right? So I put it in the back because I did not have time. I'm constantly running. I work typically from 10 a.m. to anywhere from 7:38. I work in a casino up in Reno, so the commute and then trying to do ordering and stuff of that nature. So time's very like precise for me, but I acknowledge I should have taken that product just like I did with the THCA. I packed it up that same day. I put it in my car and I took it back to the wholesaler the very next moment I could, but I pulled it from the store.
Okay. And the status of that clerk now, she no longer works for you, or he?
So again, small business, right? I don't know what the right thing to do, not do. I don't know. I didn't. So she still works for us, but because it's not like at Peppermill, I work at Peppermill, I can call the HR department. I have other forms and I'm just very new to this, I guess, small ownership. But yes, when I did consult with counsel, they did tell me that I should have terminated, but going forward, that would be my next step. But I can guarantee you it won't happen again because I do all the purchasing for both stores, and therefore I will be educate myself 100% on the product that I can bring in to the store. So this won't ever happen again.
So this individual is still employed there today, right now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Horton.
Good morning. Have you educated your clerks in your
Yes, I did
stores?
let them know. So I have 2. I have 2 clerks, one on day shift, one on swing. And I don't have that much education because again, I don't know how to use it. I have no idea on any of that. I just did tell them we don't sell that at all. And I had stuck it in the back.
Have you developed an education program any further than just telling them don't do that?
Yeah, so obviously, like I said, educating myself first, right? And going to the wholesaler and asking them those questions. Is this something that I can sell at my place of business? And then going from there and saying, hey, this is why we don't do it. So yes, I have had numerous conversations with them, even with the THCA, right, I guess. Cannabis compliance officer came in and did educate me on the percentage of that, and that's part of the reason why smoke shops aren't allowed to sell it is due to the percentage, but it's okay for cannabis stores and somebody that has that licensing to sell that product.
Thank you.
Supervisor Shooty.
Hi. After you heard about the educational visit in July, did you reach out to your clerks and ask them who was approached and what was shared?
As far as the one in July,
Yes.
the one in July, I did. We asked all the cashiers, and none of them could say anything about the smoke shop. We don't know when they came into the smoke shop or if they came into the smoke shop at all on that educational round in July. I said I had heard it on the news.
Okay, did you reach out to the sheriff's department and ask who they spoke with?
Not in July, because remember, I saw it on the news.
No, I understand,
Yeah,
but then
uh-huh.
afterwards to try to find out what transpired or what information was
But
shared?
this was maybe you're mixing up the incidents when it actually happened in October.
No, I understand that, but back to in July when they came and spoke to
businesses?
someone at your business.
Like I said, I saw it and I generalized it because it said smoke shops in the article, so that I
Okay,
did not
so-
reach out to the sheriff's department.
Okay, so my question is, so did you try to find out who they spoke with and what information was shared, and then follow up with, we need to get really clear on what we can sell, what we can't sell, what the rules are?
No, so I looked at the article, and in the article, it does state that, so I asked the wholesaler, and I pulled what I had purchased, which were so I did ask the wholesaler, but I didn't reach out, 'cause again, I read
To
it
your staff.
on the article news, and then he was like, okay, these would be considered that, go ahead and pull that. But they're going, again, I guess, they're going to clerks or they're going to the cashiers instead of.
No, I
Yeah,
understand, and that's why I was wondering, so did you
reached out,
speak
no.
to, okay.
No,
thank
I
you.
reached out to the wholesaler and then I had pulled what he said was defined as the oil burner type thing.
Supervisor White?
Thank you. Did any of your customers ever tell one of your cashiers they were going to go smoke meth with this device?
No,
Did any of your customers ever tell you that?
no. And I do work both the convenience store. I do sit behind the cash register, and no, nobody has ever come in and stated that.
Thank you.
Supervisor Giomi?
To add on to that, how would you know what customers told your clerks? I don't know how you
Well,
would know that.
we have cameras. There is audio in that, but we don't do any illegal activity. So I have told them, like, we don't do anything we're not supposed to. I've never been that type. I have been an owner at Rand, which is a convenience store, and so we never, I guess, have that rapport with our customers at all. We have more of a rapport like, oh, how's the kids? How's that? So it's never, and it's a lot of regulars because it's literally located right next door to the convenience store. If that makes sense.
How did sorry, I lost my thought. I should have written it down. Go ahead, Curtis. Maybe I'll remember it in the meantime.
Can you tell me, how are you educating yourself at this point, other than asking your wholesaler what the rules and laws are?
So I am now also an OTP license holder myself. So with that said, I am a registered wholesaler in the state of Nevada, and that is how I am educating myself, is through my business, knowing what I can sell to other retailers.
Thank you.
So you also own a convenience store, you've indicated, and so do you sell alcohol at your convenience store?
Yeah.
So I look at these kind of things to inform what my decisions are, and so you recognize rules within the liquor environment, and the owner of the business is responsible for what their staff does,
Right.
right? And so I'm a little bit perplexed when I'm understanding that you didn't even recognize that you shouldn't be selling this paraphernalia because it could be utilized for drugs.
But I pulled it as soon as I pulled it off the shelf. It was
Well,
not for sale.
I get it, but it was sold. And so what I'm concerned about is somehow, and I guess maybe part of it is I'm a little bit perplexed. If you told the staff member that it could not be sold, and now you're potentially facing that person criminal charges and your business license, you also did not fire the individual for not selling a product you told them not to sell. I'm just a little
Yeah,
bit,
and I
I'm
understand
a little
that.
bit in perplex
No,
here
I-
that that person put your business and livelihood that you're talking about at risk.
Yeah,
And
looking
yet
back,
they're still employed, and
I
so
know.
and everything that we do here that deals with these business licenses and specialty items in the alcohol arena and certainly the cannabis arena, drugs, those are things that are highly regulated and we take very seriously. And I think the issue is we need all the business owners doing their part to take that seriously. And I think the questions that I'm hearing today is I'm not understanding how you took it seriously, right? And I'm needing to understand that because when we look at a license, we had somebody that sold a beer or something it was to somebody, and we withheld their license for a very long time and darn near put that business out of
Yeah,
business. And so I'm just not understanding the steps you're taking. And why was your office even available for them to get into
It's
take them? It's not
so
locked?
yeah, it's open. It's so prior to us taking over that smoke shop, it was a staffing agency. So to do the construction on it alone, just to even knock out a couple walls was a lot. So the office and the desk is open from the back. You know.
And I may have to call Sergeant Torres back up because I wanted to clarify one other thing in the discussion here. Is your employee told the officer, unless I'm missing something in here, that they had to sell it in cash because they knew it was wrong. So is that correct? Okay, so I just wanted to put that on the record. That again is giving me a false sense that how did they get the impression they could go in the back room, get an item that's not for sale, and sell it for cash?
That I don't know if, again, we've been monitoring, obviously, the cash transactions now, because then that also raised red flags for us. We do monitor them 24/7. I honestly, I apologize. I take full responsibility. This is my livelihood. I get that. I will not make that mistake again. We're not criminal beings at all. So the criminal it's like my mom worked for the school district for a long time. Rand has been on great standing, thus far. Like it's not who we are as business owners. So I don't know how I can convey that to you that will never happen again. I do all of the purchasing, I do all of the ordering, and therefore that's how I know no product that we cannot sell will never go back into any of the stores that we have.
Do you think there should be a penalty for the actions?
I am a firm believer in God, and I do believe that we do deserve second chances. So if it were to go my way, I think this was enough for us to not, but again, I would take anything just to get that second opportunity if that's what you guys felt like we needed to do. If I could have that second opportunity to maintain their open or a fine or something, because the goal was to leave my full-time by November was my goal. I've worked in a casino setting, and I didn't want to do holidays anymore at the Pepper Mill. So, yeah.
Okay. And at the Pepper Mill, do you sell alcohol in one of your roles?
Yeah.
And I hope that you understand for me
No,
the confusion, right?
No, I
Because you're
understand,
highly
correct.
regulated and been involved in alcohol. I'm just struggling I think anyone can make a mistake, right? I do. But it is your job as the business owner to be familiar with the laws and the rules
Yeah.
of what you sell.
Yeah.
And that you are responsible for your staff, which will
Right.
occasionally let you down and do things you don't expect. But I'm just struggling with what the appropriate action is for us to take, because it has to be serious. And it also sends the message to all the other locations in our community that we take all of these issues, alcohol,
Yeah.
all this very
Correct.
seriously.
And I understand. That's why we've had a perfect standing with Rand, because we don't do stuff we follow the law. We really do. I should have taken that straight back to the wholesaler for credit, just like I did with the THCA. You guys are more than welcome. I can get an audit from the wholesalers. Nothing has been purchased. Nothing is going to be purchased. There's nothing since, July that since that first one and then the cannabis, definitely I literally that same day the cannabis compliance officer, because I did not want anything in the back for any sort of miscommunication or anything with the staff. So I literally packed it in my car, and then when I had chance, I took it back to the wholesaler.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any more questions? Does anyone need any further discussion from the sheriff's office? Have enough information? Okay. What is our pleasure? Curtis, you want to go first if it's okay? Curtis? Oh,
I'd like to hear the motion before I make another statement.
that's what I said.
Well, I was going to make a statement before someone made a motion, but go ahead, Kurt.
Go ahead.
I just, you know, to the mayor's point, you know, when you're in a business like this, it's your obligation. I know you understand this. It's your obligation to understand what you can and can't sell. Ultimately, that's your responsibility. And, you know, especially when you're in a business where what you offer can harm people. And I don't believe, based on what I've heard, that you had any intent to do that. But there's a management issue here where you're still employing an individual who allegedly committed a felony. You have a product that you didn't get out of your store. And I feel as though you took some of that a little lightly and maybe didn't even use all the resources you had available to you. I have to admit that when I first read the information before I heard everything, I was thinking that your license should be completely canceled, like eliminated. So based on what I've heard here today and based on how it went, I no longer feel that, but I don't think we can, I'm comfortable just saying, you know, good luck, let's do better next time. I'm not comfortable saying that. So I feel like a suspension of the license is in order. I guess for me, it's a question of the length of that suspension. That's where I'm trying to make a decision on. So I'll stop there and see if there's other comments.
Supervisor Schutte.
I agree with Supervisor Giomi. The fact that uniformed officers went into smoke shops and vape shops and, you know, with the purpose of educating, and right there's a message that this needs to be taken seriously. That one of your staff members chose not to, and not only not take it seriously, but speak to the fact that they're not supposed to sell it, and therefore it's a cash transaction, is troublesome. And again, that I realized when you said you took it off the shelves in the front, but the fact that it's still in the business and accessible to staff, that bothers me. So I agree with Supervisor Giomi that the suspension is in order.
Supervisor White.
I'd like to hear what the motion is before I make my statement.
I'll make a motion.
Supervisor Schutte.
I move to suspend business license BL 008595-2024 for a period of 10 days to begin upon receipt by the business of the order of suspension.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on discussion. Supervisor White.
Thank you. Indeed, as referenced earlier, NRS 453-556 does provide 12 criteria to identify what is drug paraphernalia. After hearing what everybody had to say today, of those 12 criteria, I can't make a single finding. None of them. I can't support the motion.
So one thing I will say is the reason I can support the motion is you removed the items from your front of your store shelf, which means you knew there was an issue with that product. You put it into your back room. So you acknowledge to me right there that it should not be sold. Why your staff did not listen or felt that they could do something against your wishes. I can't get into any of that because all I can do is look at actions and results. The fact that you removed it from the shelf and put it in the back room acknowledges to me that you knew you should not sell it. It's as simple as that. Whether you want to agree with interpretations of the NRS, I leave those on the criminal side doing those activities that implement that every day, but you did remove the items from the shelf and put it to the back, which is the only reason I'm not with the original comment from Supervisor Giomi, which would be to revoke your license in its entirety. This is your second chance, right? And so that's how I look at this action today, is that you know we're serious and we're not taking your license for a permanency to put you out of business, right? So I think you're right to say there's a second chance. The other thing for me to support it is it's very consistent of what we've done across all of the individuals that are violating some of these rules that we hold so dear, right? Which is the protection of our community. So no different than what we did to all of the alcohol locations, including a grocery store. We shut them down for selling alcohol for 10 days, right? So I think this is also something very consistent that we're doing. So your first, your violation, the first one, you got a warning, you removed the items, but somehow you had a staff person that let you down, I guess might be the right answer. But I'm not so sure you took the final steps to really finish it off even once you got that notice. So for that, I'll be supporting this motion. So if anybody else on discussion? We good? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, please say no.
No.
Let the record reflect it was 4 yeses, 1 no, Supervisor White. And good luck. We wish you actually success in,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you. Okay.
Yes.
Let's do a quick break. Yep. We'll come back just like 10 o'clock. Quick break. Board of Supervisors back to order, and we are on agenda item 15A. Discussion and possible action regarding coordination of legislative activity that's pending before the state legislature right now, and see if we have any policy discussions. Mr. Gresh, give us an update.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Supervisors. For the record, I'm Cameron Gresh, Carson City's Government Affairs Liaison. So just as a reminder, the legislation that we are free to discuss in this meeting can be found online at carson.org/legislature. Additionally, now, since the last meeting, if you just go onto carson.org, you'll be presented with a banner that you can click on that will also take you right to the page, so you don't even need to do the last part. During these agenda items, which occur every board meeting we're in session, I will summarize and explain legislation that staff believe are pertinent to Carson City. And when I do this, it is by default in an informational capacity. The board is free to do four things. You can direct staff to advocate for or against any bill or piece of legislation. You can choose to take no action always, or you can also direct me to come back with more information on any given piece of legislation. With that being said, I'd like to just go into a brief update on the legislature's activities and then a couple of bills I think merit discussion at this time. There are 103 days left in the 83rd session of the Nevada legislature. On February 18th, Carson City, alongside Story County, participated in a hearing before the Assembly Growth and Infrastructure Committee, during which AB 32, Carson City's bill concerning the V&T Railway, was considered. We had an engaging discussion with the membership of the committee. We were actually the very first bill heard by this committee this session. Questions were asked. I can say, as someone who participated in the meeting, in summary, the committee was in agreement with our interpretation of why the study of the V&T Railway Commission was needed and how it might turn out. And while no action was taken, a mandatory language or a vote, at the time of our hearing, we expect this to happen sometime before the first House passage deadline in about a month and a half. And so I will be ready to relate to the board any updates on the status of AB 32. However, this was a big hurdle to get over, and we will, once we pass out of the Assembly, be repeating the process more or less verbatim in the Senate later on this year. Moving on February 19th, Carson City Health and Human Services Department Director Nikki Aker testified before the Senate Committee on Finance and Assembly Committee on Ways and Means, subcommittees on Human Services, on Carson City's usage of previously appropriated healthcare funding from the last session of the Nevada legislature, that funding being SB 118. We went over, if you'll recall, during our last legislative agenda item, what Director Aker has been doing with some of that funding she received last session. As Supervisor Giomi brought up before this item, yes, we actually have already passed a law. So I don't have the Assembly bill number on me, but in effect, it suspended some agricultural policy rules passed during last session prohibiting the sale of eggs in Nevada that were not cage-free. This standard has been relaxed, not permanently done away with, to alleviate the egg shortages our state has been experiencing, along with many others. And that was some notable action by the legislature since our last discussion. I would like to now go into a couple of bills of interest that I think the board should know about. Again, you're free to take positions on this legislation, direct me to do research, or simply hear a summary, which I will provide now. AB 152 is introduced, pre-filed by Assemblyman Ken Gray. This legislation is deceptively simple, even though you wouldn't maybe not know that from the digest because it's a little bit of word salad. But essentially, this bill pertains to public records and would allow Carson City to, or would exempt Carson City from providing, or any city, from providing copies of public records that we are authorized to dispose of per NRS. These are termed old records by NRS, and that refers to anything that we might have in our possession that we are free to dispose of with the State Archives Office because we've kept it past the retention period approved by the legislature. However, it's important to note in this legislation that those records would still be open to inspection. It would just absolve us of the responsibility of going sometimes literally down into the basement to look at things that we have had for decades. The impetus for this legislation, which Carson City, along with the Nevada League of Cities and Nevada Association of Counties, provided direct input on to Assemblyman Gray, is that we have different formats that we use to track records. I'll use taxes as an example. If I come to Treasurer Razor and ask for 30 years of tax data from Carson City, those first 10 years will be pretty easy. That's all digital. 10 years before that might be a little harder. We might be talking about a system that was shut down or something like that. And then maybe 10 years before that, we're talking about some piece of technology that we would have to go find and specialize in recovering. And this is, again, just more and more staff time. So that is the impetus behind this legislation. It's not to close off records from the public. The public is free to do the job of researching if it should so choose. And Carson City is being very responsible by keeping some of these records, many of which are of significant historical value, but also take significant time to search publicly. And so that being said, the board is free to support AB 152 if it should so choose. And I think if Mayor, the board would prefer, I can continue to go through the legislation one by one and then afterwards leave it to the board to decide to take motions on any of them, or I defer to the board on whether it would prefer to do that one at a time. There are two more bills left on which I will speak on specifically.
Go ahead and continue the summary to go down because I'll take any public comment and then we'll take action.
Okay. Excellent. Then moving on to SB 69. Again, this one gets kind of technical, but just some background. This bill is introduced and is really chiefly relevant to Story County, our neighbor and partner on our own bill, AB 32. SB 69 seeks to perhaps make more efficient the process of tax abatement approvals, essentially. It brings, when you have data centers like the kind that Story County has, which Carson City does not. When you have these massive entities, they get tax abatements and then they don't pay into the infrastructure required to service usually the massive workforce that needs to mainly travel to this facility every day. Fire districts aren't consulted as a part of this process. This bill amends that. It also mandates that a local government is free to ask that the entity receiving these abatements make certain payments to defray these infrastructure costs to the public entity hosting them that are not specifically in this sense taxes. I will say right now, Carson City does not have nearly the volume of business in this sector to really have a direct impact to our city. However, if it were ever one day to get a $1 to $3.5 billion data center infrastructure tax abatement, then the provisions here would apply to us and they would assist our fire department in making sure that it can service these entities. Well, maybe perhaps we remember back in the fall, the lithium battery fire that required certainly a fair bit of coordination and effort from emergency services in the Quad Counties in order to put out. That is basically the impetus behind making sure that these entities are included at the table when businesses seeking to move into these communities engage with their local governments. And so that one is SB 69, sponsored by our partner and neighbor, Story County. Moving on to Senate Bill 123. This bill is actually remarkably simple, very much so. It is only 2 pages. It simply prohibits a board of county commissioners or a governing body of an incorporated city from enacting any ordinance or measure that imposes any form of rent control. And this bill was introduced by Senator John Ellison, who is our neighbor and represents almost the entirety of the eastern half of the state. And so that is notable for those reasons. I can say without any degree of doubt or uncertainty that affordable housing is absolutely going to be the main theme of the 83rd session of the Nevada legislature. This is but one of many housing provisions you will hear me bring before you, only to educate us on what's out there. Some of these housing provisions also don't even apply to cities. They might apply to things like landlords and certain things like that. But I'm bringing these up, even the ones that don't apply, although these ones all do in some form, just to make sure that we're aware of how our community and landlord-tenant community specifically might be affected by some of this legislation. I will just say that we are about a month and a half out from first House passage, which is where we're going to know really which of these bills actually do stand a chance at all of becoming law. And so I look forward to providing some info there in my next board update. And with that,
What was that bill number?
SB 123. And with that, I conclude my presentation on specific legislation, and the board may now direct me as it so chooses on any of the ones I discussed or any of the ones available on the website.
Thank you. Supervisor Giomi?
Just a question on SB 69. It's a big bill, so
Yeah.
I didn't get all the way through it. I had spoken to Story County previously about some components of it, and I think the data center thing, I can't imagine having to, consult. I mean, they have that issue with the fire protection district, and I get all that. But we've also had bills here from GOED where there's been abatement and absolutely no involvement at the county level on that abatement being granted to a business. So we don't get an opportunity to say, yeah, this is a great idea, or no, this is a horrible idea. We can't do anything about it. So does this bill not give us at least an opportunity to make comments on that before so right now the process is if someone goes before GOED and gets their approval to have an exemption from sales tax, and by the way, it can happen in arrears, right? It can happen backwards. So people can get an exemption for sales tax money that we've already collected, and we would actually have to pay that money back.
Retroactive.
So this bill, if I'm not mistaken, also gives us a seat at the table before that happens. Is that?
Your interpretation is correct as I understand it. And I will also make sure to follow up as we routinely discuss this legislation with Story
That's what
County.
I understood. And I don't, I don't think any of us can pre-decide whether we want to do an exemption or not. But right now, we get it pre-decided for us. So I'm in support of Story County's bill just because it gives a measure of control to local government, which I feel we should have. So I'm also in support of 152 and 123. I don't know. Well, I don't have a huge dog in that fight, but I'll stop and see where everyone else is.
Supervisor White?
SB 69, page 10, section 2, page 10 at number 12. That makes records, files, and communication confidential and not a public record. I understand and fully endorse when a private company is trying to do business or a business deal, that you keep those things private. That's a private business. But when you get in bed with the government, your business should necessarily be public. We expect our government to act in the light of day. And I find that substantially objectionable that records, files, and communication about a redevelopment project are confidential. In section 3, page 13, number 5C, it actually requires that people involved in this negotiation to sign non-disclosure agreements. And again, you can do that all day you want in the private sector. When you get in bed with the government, you should do your business with the sun shining on you. I have no intention of being in favor of SB 69. AB 152, I understand the extraneous efforts that a government might go through to go dig around in a dusty old basement. But if you don't want to dig around in a dusty old basement, get rid of the records. If you're not required to have them, then get rid of them. If you have them, provide them when you're asked for them. Don't tell somebody to go down in my basement and dig around on your own to see if you can figure out where to find it. That's just wrong. Again, we should be doing business with the sunshine on our faces, not monkeying around with this. We're not giving you what you need. So I will not support AB 152 either. AB 123 is perfect bill, very short, to the point. I'll support that one.
So I want to, let's see, SB 69. There are lots of component pieces within that bill. The confidentiality of certain records of a business exists everywhere throughout the code and the statute, and really goes down even to as simple as you're not entitled to someone's sales tax return. That's a confidential business record. And so I might need a little more information for full support, because it says any information determined pursuant to this is confidential, and I'm not sure whether that's too broad. And so I lend myself a little bit with what Supervisor White is saying. I think their proprietary information of the organization should be confidential. And so I don't have, excuse me, a problem supporting the legislation, but I'm going to reserve that. I'm going to assume there's going to be some amendments, and that section we would support amendment in to say the proprietary records of any business is a confidential record. We don't, like you said, we don't share
Right.
people's, right.
When we hire a contractor to build a street, we
Right.
don't ask for their tax records. We have no business in that.
Well, and that's what I'm saying.
But the way I read this, what is confidential is the makings of the redevelopment agreement. And that should be done in public.
So I can recall many agreements that are done with NV Energy, Southwest Gas, companies that are looking that sell back to a grid, things like that. I remember working at the Department of Corrections, and I had a fully executed agreement that was confidential and placed into a safe. And then I had a secondary agreement that took out, like 9 lines were blacked out that were the proprietary pieces. And so I'm okay with supporting this, but Carson City helping or working with them on the confidential information. Otherwise, I'm okay.
Can I just make a
With the bill.
comment?
Mhm.
I think some of the language like that, and I'm not commenting that anybody's wrong or anybody's right. I'm just making a statement. I believe that language ended up in here because that was the whole argument as to why this always remained at the state level and didn't come down to the county level, was because of the confidentiality issues and the fact that Nevada wouldn't get these businesses here absent the ability for the proprietary information to remain proprietary. Tesla would not have come had this, this bill been enacted. That's not right. They wouldn't come had the county had to have all this information disclosed. So there absolutely is a fine line there between what's proprietary and what's public. And I think the struggle is going to be in finding something that the state will live with and can satisfy them, that still allows us to have some measure of local control. I think that's really going to be the tipping point for this bill. Because in concept, I think we can all support it because it does return local control. So I think you have enough on that.
On Assembly Bill 152, I'm in support of this. Mostly in the arena is we don't even know if we have the record. like you said, we know in the last 10 years where all the records are, whether they're digital, but when we get a FOIA that's just a general, like you said, let me have the taxes from 30 years ago, our staff doesn't even know whether that does or does not exist, right? And so to honestly answer the request, it's like, okay, if I say no and then they find out there was a record, then I have a different problem, right? Because the staff person said, well, I don't know that we have any of those. Oh, yeah, it's in a shed in the back somewhere or another. So, and I'm also inclined on a piece that Supervisor White said, we should be purging our records. They cost a lot of money to store, but it's hard to let go of historical records that we do want to let somebody
Yeah,
go
it-
through them.
It is important to follow the records retention without a doubt.
Right.
But we all have a habit of, well, let's just put that in the Connex or let's put it here, put it there. And we shouldn't be doing that. That serves us no purpose. You know, it just causes us trouble in the long run and we don't need that.
Yep.
Let's just follow the rule and move forward.
And if you are storing those records, you've got them cataloged. I will disagree
Not
to a
really.
certain extent.
No, we don't.
Well,
Don't.
Believe me, it's hit and miss.
I know that
Yeah.
record storage I was involved with, every one of those boxes had a date and a content written right on the front of it and a ledger to tell you where that box was.
Well,
How it should be.
I can tell you.
That's
and
how it
Curtis
should
can-
be.
Can relate, having worked for the city for 32 years,
It's a no.
that isn't happening.
It's a no.
And I, you know, I would
support
just
it.
be cautious about mucking with it too much and forcing us to get rid of records. I mean, to me, this is a first good step in the bill.
Right.
I spoken to Senator Gray about this bill a couple of weeks ago before he introduced it. Had him again last night, and he went over it again. He's got a lot of support on the bill. I don't know that we should. No, I think we should support
No,
it,
I
but
said
I don't
support.
think we should. Correct. I don't think we should get into the weeds with him and tell him, you know, how his bill should have been written better. That's my opinion.
And then on SB 123, so it's indicating that a Board of County Commissioners cannot enact rent control measures, but a housing authority still can, right? This bill does not,
Or a city.
right?
No,
Well, no, we're
municipal-
considered a Board of County Commissioners as a
We
city
are,
under
But
244.
Las Vegas is not.
Right.
Well, it says
Well, that,
municipal organization cannot.
yeah, under Section 2 comes and gets the cities.
Oh, yeah, it does get the city. You're correct.
That's
Thank you.
okay. That's all right.
Doesn't get boards. That's the point.
Right. That's what I'm clarifying is, again, your actual housing authorities can still work in that arena.
Doesn't a housing
Right.
authority work at the pleasure of the county
Yeah, I
commissioners?
think it does.
I don't know. I'm not, simple bills are never that simple.
In Clark County, the Housing Authority is a department of the county. It's not, I don't think it's a board. I think we should let this bill, I think we should see what happens
I
with
would
this
like
bill.
more information.
I mean, there's not much
At this
more we
point,
can
to
get,
be
but I-
neutral until we
Yeah, I
get some
just-
hearings.
Yeah, I just don't
Let's do
think
that.
we
Further
need to.
research on
Personally, I
this
just
one.
don't think we need to take a position on it.
Further
I-
research.
I don't think this bill's gonna get anywhere personally. I'm not saying I wouldn't support it. I just,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it makes sense to support a bill that's gonna die, and not even get to the floor. It could happen, but I don't know, you know.
So further research on this one, I think, is everybody kind of okay with where we're going? Is there any public comment, Mr. French?
Thank you, Mayor and Board. Denny French. On SB 123, my concern is that with our issues of housing and what I've heard of from the business and housing commissions that I've listened to for this state, just on newscasts and such, prices are not going to go down. Rentals and such like that are all going to go up. home process of buying a house is going to become more difficult for many different reasons, for insurance reasons, for financial reasons. Loans and such as far as those are going to go differently as far as accessibility and qualifications. And I would like to see us be able to say, if we get land from BLM or state, that we say, okay, if we're not looking to have it for ourselves, can we put any kind of considerations on a rent cap if that property could have been ours or could have gone to anybody and it's going to a private individual to buy it or a developer to develop it, that we then say, we need low-income housing. We would like to put a restriction on your rent or such, that we would still have that possibility as a part of the question. Also, I would like to suggest that with rental caps, an individual like myself that has a place should be able to rent it for what they can get. And those caps shouldn't be there. But any nonprofit or place that we've allowed to be built under a low-income housing deal, that then we should be able to keep that. So I don't know, again, that's a more clarification on this grant for me, but I do want that rent control not to be taken out of the purview of the community's input. So through you or through the housing, have some considerations for those. BLM land is up for shots now. State is probably following. And it's going to go quick. So thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, so the way I'm reading this one is SB 123 is more information is needed, but track the bill and report back to us. SB 69, we were in favor of, but would like clarifications within the confidentiality records, to ensure it's proprietary information. And then 152, I think everyone except potentially Maurice is in favor of us supporting. Do we get
Got
that
the
right?
record. If you have the record, you should know you have it, and you should know where it is. If you don't, you're violating the open meeting law when somebody asks you for that record and you don't give it to them.
To
Not
me,
the
the
open meeting
language
law.
is provide. We have to provide.
That's why we
I
want
don't
it
think
in
we
here,
need to
right?
provide. We can make available, but not provide.
Okay. Is that enough information? Everybody good? Okay. You have enough information to move forward?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Hopefully they don't do a lot and keep this simple. Thank you. Okay, we will move then to agenda item 16A, discussion and possible action on a resolution to acquire from the Carson City Treasurer's Office approximately 12,196.80. We got to get that portion there. Square feet of undeveloped land designated as APN 0100999-01 at no cost,
Grass is gonna float away.
and authorized for the treasurer to execute a quitclaim deed and all documents necessary to complete the acquisition. Your name is not listed here as the first speaker, but since you're sitting in the chair, you got it. Mr. Razor.
So thank you, Madam Mayor and Board Supervisors. For the record, Andrew Razor, Carson City Treasurer. So this is actually a two-part item, as the mayor was referencing. When you look at NRS 361-603, it talks about how if there is a property held in trust by the treasurer for the county, that a government or local municipality can make a request to the Board of County Commissioners or Supervisors once they've identified a purpose for that parcel to then acquire it. And then it would be the board then that would decide whether they want to accept that parcel and then direct the county treasurer then to issue notice to the last known property owner or registered heir. And so that's why we have Parks and Recs here as the first item and then the treasurer, me, as that second part. But if you'd like, I can give you a brief overview of the parcel, the situation, why we're presenting it here to you as listed in my
I think
letter.
really that's the only issue at hand is why do we want the parcel?
So with this parcel, again, it has delinquent taxes. In speaking with Parks and Recreation Supervisor Jennifer Budd, she did identify to me that the city would be willing to accept this parcel because it abuts other public property owned by Carson City, and that it would make sense because it's along the river for the city to acquire it, and that it would be included with the Parks and Recreation's management of those lands along the Carson City River.
From the picture, it's in the river.
Yeah, I was
Most
just
of it
gonna
is,
laugh.
yes.
Isn't it true?
Flood, there won't be any.
Yeah, that's the other thing too, is you can't access this parcel. It's not like you can just drive up. Really, in order to access this parcel, you either have to float down the river or you have to access it through Carson City's adjoining parcel as well. So it is a separate parcel all by itself. It's essentially landlocked.
Is there an easement on our land, on the city-owned land, to the parcel?
Not that I know of. And looking at the map, and from what I can see, is there's a dirt trail that comes off of Carson River Road there that goes up along to where you could technically access, but that's still on public land. That's Carson City land. Nothing that I can see right now shows that that is an easement that has been allowed to access that parcel. Originally, it was part of another parcel, and then it was one parcel, then it was separated, and then deeded back to the original property owner.
Anybody have any questions? I think it gives us a right to be able to mitigate an issue if we're mitigating all around anyway. It makes sense that we wouldn't need a right of entry or any other thing. We could just, it makes sense for it to be ours unless there's some rationale not. Okay, nobody else has anything? Is there any public comment on this item?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Oh,
Let Denny can go.
okay.
I'll ask after Denny has his say.
Go on, Denny.
Denny French, Carson City. Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to Mr. Razor for his explanation on our discussion. Gosh, I don't know what day that was, about this particular site. It is amazing circumstances. I wouldn't want to have to go down the river to get to my property, and if I were wanting to develop it, I would have to get so many okays and leeways and such. But I'm so glad that we're considering this. It's just sitting there, and I'm hoping it will become part of the open space that's available for onlookers and critters. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Just so I double check. Okay, Supervisor White.
Thank you. I have some questions for Jen. So, has the Open Space Committee considered this proposal?
Jennifer Budge, Parks and Recreation Director. No, we have not brought it to the Open Space Committee.
Outside of the broad master plan statement about the Carson River corridor being a priority, does this property find its way to the top of the priority list at this time?
There would be no cost for the acquisition, so no, it wouldn't, but Carson City River property acquisitions have been identified in general as the priority.
Staff report doesn't provide an evaluation form for acquiring open space property. Has this property been evaluated by Open Space for acquisition?
We have not completed an open space evaluation form for the property, no.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions? Okay, what's your pleasure? Would someone like to make a motion?
Sure, I'll make it. Let's see, what are we, 16A?
Apple.
I move to adopt resolution number 2025 R2 and authorize the treasurer to execute a quitclaim deed and all documents necessary to complete the acquisition.
I second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Okay, then I'm just going to go ahead and open up on 17A. It's the other portion of the activity here. Is there anything specific that needs to be brought to our attention on this? Sure, the public.
For the record, Andrew Razor, Carson City Treasurer. No, Madam Mayor, from what I've listed in my letter here, I believe that we've explained everything, not only about the background as to how the Carson City Treasurers came to have the deed against the property, but the steps that we've taken to contact previous owner who did pass away, the successor trustee who did pass away, and then the last known heir to the property. We were able to speak with her, the last known heir, and based on the conversation had with her, it doesn't sound like she had a copy of the will or could find one. She was going to try to provide one if she could. 2 weeks ago, I did leave a voice message for her advising her about this meeting, saying that she could attend or submit public comment. And I also submitted a letter by first-class mail. And then if the board does approve, then I would then submit a certified letter to her advising her of the 90-day mark that she has to pay the property taxes in order to claim the property, which we would then issue a reconveyance deed if she did pay those property taxes. And then this issue would be moot. But we would also include the copy of the board resolution so that she has all those documents to know that this is what is expected of her if she decides to pay or not pay the property taxes.
Okay, thank you so much. Nobody had any questions? Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, motion, Supervisor White is purple.
Thank you. I move to adopt resolution number 2025R3 and direct the treasurer to provide notice to the last known heirs of the property as presented.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect that was unanimous. Thank you for the good work on that. Okay, we are now on to agenda item, let me clear everything. Oops. 18, which is our non-action items. Do we have any items? Anybody? Supervisor Gioni.
Just two things from other boards. CTA, we got word that both of our 1 and 2 Carson to Canada selections got their permit. One of them's doing the entire trip from the Mexican border all the way up, and the other one's going to start actually on the Capitol steps in Carson. So they're working out the details of when that is, and the ending was going to be filmed actually in Canada, and now due to some law changes, Canada's not going to allow that. Just gotta wonder about unintended consequences, I guess. But anyway, so they're going to get somewhere close and film it somewhere up there. And there's some alternative folks in case one of those folks gets injured. I had their names written down. I can't find that paper right now, but they're not local. There was really no one local who put in for it. So that's on the CTA front. On Water Subconservancy, only comment I was going to make, well, maybe two, because you want to talk about Ed? You want to mention Ed's thing? Well, no, go ahead. You were there, so I'll let you do that. But I'm just going to let people know that as of the 18th, in the Carson River watershed, we were at 98% snow water equivalent. But it's gonna drop like a rocket here this next week, because we're gonna have pretty warm weather and nothing on the horizon. So needing a miracle March again. So that's it. I'll let Lisa talk about Ed James and what he got.
Person of the year. So Ed James, our the head of Carson Water Subconservancy, won Lifetime Achievement Award with the National Water Resource Association. They had a conference last month, and Ed, his wealth of knowledge is incredible. His involvement in community and all things water is just amazing. And so he was surprised, and a couple of us went up And we were sitting there in the back, and he'd be looking around, and we would all duck. And then when they made the presentation, there was quite the loud shout out on his behalf. He is just an amazing asset to our community and to our watershed. Again, his wealth of knowledge. Ask about the Alpine Decree, and he can tell you anything and everything. And so huge congratulations to Ed James.
Well, you scared me for a moment. I thought you were going to give me his retirement date.
It's
Because there's some
it's
people
soon.
in this
It's-
room that
it's going to
think
be
that's
s-
okay. That's
it's
what I'm
going-
worried about.
It's going to be soon. I
That's
think
going to be a major loss.
I think he may make it another. I think all this year, maybe next year, but that's probably it. But who knows? It will be a big loss for not just
Yeah.
this watershed, but for Nevada.
Oh, yeah.
I hope he realizes that his depth of knowledge and experience is such that he may well be retired, but his phone will not stop ringing.
Yeah. Well, our board has threatened on many occasions to chain him to his desk and ship food into him a couple of times a day. But we might all end up in jail by doing that. So.
Does anyone else have anything to share? Okay, then we will move on to our final public comment. Do I have any final public comment? Mr. French.
Denny French, Carson City. Thank you, Mayor. My public comment will be related to Kuntz and the Trailhead Phase 3. It's terrible. It's in bad shape. You get up on Kuntz and getting to the trailhead, which has been quite a project and it turned out very nice looking and all that. And it still doesn't have a deal for hand washing, I don't think. But the main thing is, I brought that up earlier, so I will stick to my considerations. I have a feeling that it should be repaired because it's going to cause little vehicles like mine some damage, if not just in alignment, probably in my suspension. Full body unit as it is, I can't adjust it by saying I'm going to do something with the frame. So the whole vehicle is going to be affected. And I'm sorry that they're not putting the money that they do have available into such. But I think it's being held off because of the developmental consideration on the BLM land below it and along it. And whether or not we even have the right-of-way through Carson City property to have a way to the trailhead or not is in question. I still have to review that, considering those such. I also would like to restate my considerations for adding parks and recreation and open space as one commission because of their overlapping considerations and their overlapping employment of public works, but parks, recreational equipments, and personnel as far as their time and efforts. I also would like to just add a light moment, if I can put it in, on page A5 of February 19th, Wednesday's paper, Officer Furlong is brought up. And I hope that you all take a look at it. It's relating to dealing with apparently illegal sales of alcohol. But he has suggested he does not, Sheriff Furlong suggests he doesn't know that there's a relatively connection there. But he thought it was funny that he's mentioned in the paper, having been here, he said probably he could have been that officer, but he is not a police officer, he is a sheriff. But I thought that was good, and I won't use up the remainder of the time, but to thank you for your indulgence, and I wish more people would be involved with these activities to get to know you all better as people and the subject matter and be more broad looking into all that it takes to do this city and keep it going. Thank you.
Mhm. Supervisor Schutte.
I do want to mention one thing regarding the Nevada appeal. A couple days ago in Past Pages, 155 years ago, the first silver dollar was pressed in Carson City. And it was wonderful, actually, now that we have the sense of place sculpture and it says 1870, and then to see in Past Pages reference to that. So I took a picture of that if anyone would like it. But just kind of a fun coincidence.
Great. Okay. Being no further public comment. Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all for a good meeting. Another.